I don't think Benjamin Netanyahu is attacking her to actually attack her. I think he's attacking her to try and steer away the stink of how staunchly she stands for their policies.
You know what's in the air, you know what's in the air, you know what's in the air, you know what's in the air. It's possibility, it's possibility, it's possibility, it's possibility.
All right, so we got a few things to talk about. Last night, Abdul El-Sayed did his debate with Haley Stevens, the Michigan primary debate for the Democratic Party. Mallory McMorrow dropped out of that race a couple days ago. So Abdul El-Sayed is up against the AIPAC candidate, Haley Stevens, directly. It's just them two, and they did a debate last night, so we're going to go over that. And then later, we're going to get to all the Platner stuff. The final nail in the coffin has dropped for Graham Platner. He was accused of rape, credibly more so than the other accusations that were made against him. However, there has been very thoroughly a pattern of behavior established here, and essentially all of Platner's support has evaporated. So we're going to get to all that. I have a lot of thoughts on that. First, here is the first clip from the Michigan debate where they're talking about Israel. This is a longer exchange about the relationship between America and Israel and AIPAC, which is what Abdul El-Sayed was hitting Haley Stevens on over and over again. So you're going to see how he was doing that, as well as how she was attempting to deflect and create a narrative that would work against El-Sayed.
We need long-term peace. Donald Trump has failed us. The Prime Minister of Israel has failed in that regard. And he was just coming after me on this today. Look, I am unafraid, Michigan. You are my North Star, and no illegal wars, no unilateral wars at our expense.
I think it's worth asking why we got into this war in the first place. There is one man who's been wanting this war fought, and that is the Prime Minister of Israel. And the reason that we've seen this war fought is because the impact of AIPAC in our politics. AIPAC has spent tens of millions of dollars in attack ads against me or ads lying about the Congresswoman's record. They clearly want one individual, and it's not me. And ask yourself why it is that we are paying $5 gas, why it is we can't seem to get out of this quagmire. It's because for too long, our foreign policy has been handed to us by the likes of the State of Israel and AIPAC, who has made sure that Democrats and Republicans are doing their bidding. And so long as our politicians continue to be bought off by AIPAC, do not be surprised when we fight wars that are in their best interest, to annex Israel, to annex Lebanon, or to do genocide in Gaza.
Congresswoman, 30 seconds.
Well, Abdul, I would say no one is afraid of you. And in fact, the GOP is spending thousands of dollars to prop up your campaign because they think they will make it easier for Mike Rogers to win if you are the nominee.
If Congresswoman Stevens makes it or Mike Rogers wins, either way, Israel will win. AIPAC is perfectly fine with either of my two opponents because they know that they will have a comfortable, reliable vote in the U.S. Senate. If you want politics to work for you, if you want politics to rebuild your schools or fix your infrastructure or to invest in your health care, you have an alternative choice. We're running to get money out of politics, put money in your pocket, and pass Medicare for all. There's a reason that both Chuck Schumer and Donald Trump don't want to see me on the inside of the U.S. Senate because I'm a threat to politics.
The difference between my opponent and myself on this issue is that I believe in a two-state solution. I can say that Israel has a right to peacefully exist alongside the people of Palestine and in Gaza. It is very clear that Mr. Netanyahu has not made us safer, has not brought us closer to peace, and he's endangered Jews here in America and around the world. This is why he was just trashing me today on CNN. I am not afraid of bullies.
Look, I believe in equal rights to peace, dignity, and self-determination for Palestinians and Jewish Israelis alike. But the question I think the Congresswoman needs to answer is, why has she allowed $40 million of outside spending, the bulk of it coming from AIPAC, to come into this race? I don't think Benjamin Netanyahu is attacking her to actually attack her. I think he's attacking her to try and steer away the stink of how staunchly she stands for their policy. So let's take that opportunity. Explain what you've given away for AIPAC support in this race.
30 seconds to wrap up.
No one owns my vote and no one owns my policies. Anyone who is contributing to my Senate campaign is doing so because of my proven record of fighting for Michigan.
So some interesting things going on here. El-Sayed has the upper hand when it comes to these back and forths about who's getting money from who's more corrupt, blah, 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 because he's talking about AIPAC, which is the well-established sort of boogeyman in politics right now. Everybody knows what AIPAC is and what they do. So being able to tie her to that, which is completely credible, completely accurate, and she does not deny that at any point throughout this debate, that she's tied to AIPAC, she says, well, they don't buy me, they don't own me, and blah, blah, blah. And people who support me because I'm the best for Michigan. But she cannot say that she does not get supported from AIPAC, even though they sort of funnel support to her through shell PACs and shell companies and stuff. She's clearly the AIPAC candidate. So that's why this whole thing about Benjamin Netanyahu is interesting, because in an interview with Dana Bash, she pitched him a question about Haley Stevens, saying, you know, that Israel's current policy makes Jews less safe. He starts to go off on her about how, well, she is not a supporter of Israel. So it seems like that was completely coordinated for this debate so that she could say, well, I'm an enemy of Benjamin Netanyahu. And even in that interview, Dana Bash is like, well, she's very clearly a supporter of Israel and supports funding to Israel. And I don't know if he didn't know that, or if maybe that was something they pitched to him without him knowing, but it's very convenient that he would criticize Haley Stevens and give her that opportunity to say that she's tough, because she's trying to present herself as a fighter here. I'm a fighter against Trump. I'm a fighter against Netanyahu. But the reality is this is about the policy, and that's why it's always the more powerful point that Haley Stevens is taking AIPAC money and supports the policy of Israel. So everything else is kind of fluff, and especially the fighter aesthetic and Netanyahu this, Netanyahu that is all for show. She's the AIPAC candidate. So then she has these attacks about how Abdul El-Sayed is secretly a millionaire and he should release his tax returns, and he has a talent agent that he does speeches for and stuff. So that's her vector of trying to make him seem like a fraud or attack his credibility or whatever. I think that might have some legs. We'll see. I think it's dumb, because I think ultimately the stronger point is what the money coming into your campaign is coming from. However, if she can successfully get enough attention on demanding his tax returns or something like that, that could become a political liability for him. But again, he has the upper hand by being able to tie her to AIPAC narratively, which is something that people already care about. Whereas, you know, whatever El-Sayed's career as a speaker is, people are less interested in, and I highly doubt that he is as wealthy as some of the people who are donating to Haley Stevens' campaign. So in this next part, you're going to see that laid bare. You're going to see that she has some developed attacks against him, but what he has is much more detailed information about how the money that Haley Stevens accepts affects people in Michigan. So I think that's a much more powerful approach. So here's that.
The question was about the direction of the party. Is it shifting?
Well, I'll tell you this. It won't shift if we continue to elect leaders who take money from the same corporations who have broken with the interests of the American public. Chuck Schumer desperately wants one of us to be the next senator, and it's not me. So if you want your politics dictated you by AIPAC or Chuck Schumer, then I'm not your guy. I think we need to go back to the idea of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. $40 million of spending in this race. $40 million. I want you to think about what that means. That's money that buys something on the back end. So if you elect the person who took that money, don't be surprised when they betray you.
Except for, again, I have the receipts as the most effective lawmaker for Michigan. I'm not trying to go viral or get a good tweet out, all right? Well, transparency remains really key here. You can see my tax returns. I've made them public. Again, I call on my opponent to do the same, because we do need to know who's putting money in your pocket, particularly if you have a talent agency getting you paid speeches. I've been busy doing the work for Michiganders. Period, full stop. Power Outage Relief Act. We're still dealing with that. Small businesses losing their revenues. We got to do supply chain security. I've got a bill for that. I am ready to go for us, Michigan, on day one.
30 seconds to wrap.
Let's talk about power outages. People sleeping in dark rooms without electricity for the fourth straight day. My opponent's taking $37,500 from DTE. Ask yourself what that buys. Our politics have been deeply and profoundly corrupted by corporate money, and I want to get money out. You want to talk about transparency? There's a group called Center Forward that happened to pay for a flight for the Congresswoman and her mother to Portugal. I want to understand what she promised them in return. You want to talk about transparency? Why are there $40 million flowing into our politics right now in support of my opponent?
Yeah. Well, and again, I have the receipts and I have the bill to stand up to the utility companies at the lower rates.
Explain the receipts.
So, yes, I've got the multiple bills.
I'll give you a chance.
Yes.
We have apparently scratched the surface on a couple of differences between the two of you. And this is not scripted, and this is not something that's planned, and the people in the control room are about to pull their hair out. But I want to give you 30 seconds, and I want to give you 30 seconds to pursue whatever this is that's going on here. Obviously, you've got a question about some of the money in her campaign. You've got a question about some of the money in his pocket.
Yeah.
30 seconds, go.
Well, look, my opponent wants to make this race about lies and attacking my integrity and the work that I've done for the people of Michigan. Look, I was the person from Michigan on the team working on President Obama's auto rescue. I have a proven track record of that I am proud of fighting for this state, standing up to special interests, and I have 15 labor unions standing alongside me in this fight, and some other proven individuals as well. So can we stop the lies, and can we get the transparency out that my opponents long talked about?
I'd love to stop the lies that are being told on TV by organizations like the Center for Democratic Priorities, which, by the way, didn't exist until it started to run ads for my opponent. Like the United Democratic Progressives, which, by the way, is a front for AIPAC. Like Center Forward, which bought airline tickets for my opponent, for her mother and herself to go to Portugal. I don't know what they talked about. I don't know what they did. So if we want to talk about lies, I think it's really important for us to understand who's paying for them and what was said on the back end to allow them to be told. Because $40 million, it doesn't come for free.
So is the GOP...
I'm glad we got that all
Yeah, so
cleared
she
up.
keeps talking about receipts, and what she's talking about is like, I have the receipts to show that I have gotten all this stuff done for Michigan. But what it sounds like she's saying is I have receipts in terms of where the money's coming from. At least that's what El-Sayed is able to flip it to and say, well, show us the receipts. So that's where she kind of walked into that. She also walked into this thing about the power outage bill, where he essentially says the legislation that you signed made the problem worse. And he makes this point a couple times, that essentially Haley Stevens' solutions make these problems worse, not better, because she's taking the corporate money. And he is illustrating the places where she's taking that corporate money and asking her questions about that. So while she's trying a similar approach in terms of unearthing things and saying, let's try to get a question going that people can continuously ask El-Sayed and hound him about. And that might work a little, but he is able to more specifically tie Haley Stevens not only to AIPAC but other corporate interests in Michigan and raise questions about that, which I think is more potent. But we'll see, because Haley Stevens, being the AIPAC candidate, has a lot of money behind her. So there's a lot of money to drill that message home, whatever she wants to do about El-Sayed. I don't think it's going to be as powerful or as palpable as El-Sayed's message. And I think the boost that he got after McMorrow tried to tie him to Nick Fuentes through Hassan Piker in a weird stretch, I think that has established him as the anti-establishment, anti-Israel candidate, which will carry him far. Not necessarily enough to carry him over the edge, but pretty far. So that leads to the Platner situation. So first of all, I mean, his campaign is dead. He hasn't dropped out yet, which is an important point that we're going to talk a decent amount about. But he's done. I mean, this final accusation was the nail in the coffin, and that's for good reason. And there's a lot of people saying, oh, you know, this was obvious, or of course there was going to be more, or people that wrote him off a long time ago. And all of that is true. Various parts of this were quite obvious. He was a walking red flag of a candidate the entire time. But this accusation was corroborated in a way that the other accusations weren't. It seems like this accusation was supposed to be in the original article about his unsettling behavior, but this accuser was not ready to go on the record about it, and then she did. So it's more credible, and it also establishes and sort of finalizes the pattern of behavior that was emerging about, you know, violence and sexual violence that this guy was capable of, and in this case had committed. And that's where, to me, it ties back with the whole mercenary thing, where he was working for the company that's essentially Blackwater after his tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that violence and the seeming gleeful acceptance and enjoyment that he had of that violence, you know, indicated that he was a person that was capable of doing horrific things, not just killing people, but worse things. And so that is what, to me, this story indicated, is that, like, oh, okay, this is the guy who brought his capacity to hurt people and never speak about it, do things that no human being should ever do. This is a person with an enormous capacity for that. So that's what, in my opinion, should have been clear from his mercenary stint and even the tattoo, that this is a guy who is violent in a way that obviously contradicts the motives of the movement and also makes him a liability. And it's incredibly likely that he raped not only this woman, but many, many others that will never get the chance to speak about it. So he's a horrible person. He should go away forever. And it is 100% a stain that he was ever promoted. However, there's a lot of conversations flying around about, white leftists liked him because of this, and white candidates like him have a standard that other non-white candidates don't have. All of that is 100% true. And certainly the bias of, a guy like him getting the amount of leniency that he gets when non-white candidates don't get defended as much. They just don't have as much room to fuck up. That's a basic of how white privilege works. And Graham Platner is absolutely an example of that. But honestly, I think the more important part of this, the more urgent conclusion to come to about this, is that the reason Graham Platner got to where he was at is because of his platform. And that's the reason that anybody supported him in the first place or was willing to defend him through all of these scandals. And so while it's true that white privilege and white bias comes into that because people wanted to believe in the best in a guy like Graham Platner, wanted to believe that he could be a true champion of the movement, and gave him way more chances than anybody else would get, certainly more than he deserved. But the reason for that, speaking for myself as somebody who was skeptical of Graham Platner but also did say that I support him, I was careful not to cape for him too much, but I was supportive of his campaign. And the reason is because he had the right message, just as Abdul El-Sayed does, just as Summer Lee does, all the Democrats who just won in New York, Zohran Mamdani, etc. And so while this is going to be a mess going forward, we don't exactly know what's going to happen. Graham Platner has not officially dropped out yet, and in my opinion, that's for good reason. Because even though he's a horrendous person and has lost all credibility, he still has leverage. His campaign still has leverage in the fact that the voters voted for his platform. And that's where I don't think we should get lost in the personality aspect of this. It matters. The white privilege matters. The bias that goes into this matters. But ultimately, the reason for his popularity was his platform, and that needs to be replicated. So the only way that we can maintain control of this situation for the movement is to continue to support that platform. And right now, that looks like using the leverage of that campaign, refusing to drop out until it is guaranteed that his replacement will be somebody like Troy Jackson or one of the other options that they have. There's limited options. It looks like Troy Jackson might be the best one. There's other corporate and centrist Democrats that the Democratic Party of Maine wants to put in. So I absolutely think that Platner or his campaign, whoever, should use the leverage of the fact that they won that primary because of his platform to make sure that the candidate that comes after him matches that platform. And that is ultimately the reason that Platner got across the finish line. And in my honest opinion, that's still a good thing. We don't know what's going to happen from here, so maybe we'll end up in a worse position. But if we get somebody like Troy Jackson put in his place, who is a DSA-backed candidate, Platner was not DSA-backed. Troy Jackson is. So we could, because of this, end up in an even better position, not because Platner and his personality and this and that about him, but because of his platform. So if we stay loyal to that platform and keep supporting that platform, showing up and demanding that platform, despite the fact that Graham Platner is a piece of shit and needs to go away, then we can turn this into a positive. And that is ultimately the most important thing to stay focused on when it comes to this electoral stuff. When it comes to the social aspect of how we build this movement, we absolutely need to reflect on how a guy like this ever got a second of consideration in the first place. And that's on me as well. There's lots of commentators who contributed to that. There's definitely a racial aspect to that. And that's something that needs to be reflected on. I'm most annoyed with myself that I ignored the obvious implied violence from his military and mercenary background and how that mapped onto the rest of the things that he said and his history, etc. And also the fact that alcohol seems to be the clear running thread, the clear explanation that he has given for all of these stories, cheating on his wife, getting the tattoo, being a bad boyfriend, whatever. Alcohol was kind of the running explanation. And that was really the indication that there was going to be more stories. I mean, if this guy was like a CIA operative, there would have been none of these stories. But it was the fact that he is an alcoholic brute that should have been the indication that there were more things coming out that he couldn't even account for, let alone the fact that these are heinous accusations, and I absolutely believe they're true. So he needs to step aside, but not before it is guaranteed that the person who's going to take his place is going to match his platform. And he does have the leverage to do that as long as people don't completely give up on the process because of what a piece of shit he is. That's not the right way to handle this. The right way to handle this is to continue to back the platform, because that's what got it this far, and we are better off with that than we would have been with Janet Mills or whoever else they want to put up instead.
I'm in the pocket, and they know they can't slow it, can't stop shit. How the game so cold, so toxic, can't drop cause they're in somebody's pocket. For me that's not it.